Derek Walsh had seen some strange things in his 34 years, but nothing quite prepared him for the sight of a 12-foot tall insect wearing a safety vest. The creature's multiple eyes blinked at him in what might have been confusion or concern, hard to tell with bugs. You understand the risks, yes, Turek clicked his mandibles together nervously. This division handles the most dangerous cargo in the galaxy. One mistake and you become a statistic. Derek nodded, keeping his expression neutral. Back home in Montana, he'd worked with 2,000 lb bowls that could gore a man in seconds. He figured the principle was the same, just with different packaging. I've handled difficult animals before. I'll be careful. The insectoid supervisor made a sound like rattling plates. Probably alien laughter, though Derek couldn't be sure. Animals, yes, we process animals here, but not like your Earth creatures. Turek tapped a control panel and a holographic image appeared between them. This is a rift jaw. Derek studied the rotating image. The creature looked like someone had taken a wolf, covered it in armored plates, and replaced its teeth with crystalline daggers for powerful legs ended in claws that could probably shred steel. Its eyes glowed with an unsettling intelligence. They come from a planet called Kraragmar. Turek continued. Gravity 3 times Earth's standard, atmosphere so toxic it would dissolve your lungs in minutes. These creatures are apex predators in the truest sense. Class 5 extinction threats. What does that mean exactly? It means a single rift jaw, if released on a populated world, could theoretically kill every living thing on that planet within a standard year. Turek's antennae drooped. We have one rule when handling them, only one rule that matters. All others. Derek leaned forward, paying attention now. Never make eye contact with a rift jaw. Never. The hunting instinct interprets direct eye contact as a challenge. Once triggered, they enter a killing frenzy. No force in the galaxy has ever stopped one. When that happens, the only survivors are those who never looked. What happens to those who do? Turek pulled up another hologram. This one showed a list of names, hundreds of them, maybe thousands. Next to each name was a single word: deceased. This is the complete record of every being who has made eye contact with a rift jaw in the last 3 centuries. As you can see, the survival rate is 0%. Derek felt a chill run down his spine, but he kept his voice steady. When am I likely to encounter one? Next week. A transport arrives carrying 6 specimens, bound for a military research facility. We are the processing station. You will be part of the handling team. Turek's whole body seemed to shudder. I have overseen 17 rift jaw transfers in my career. Each time I'm certain it will be my last. The fear never fades. The rest of the orientation passed in a blur of safety protocols, emergency procedures, and dire warnings. Derek met the other members of his team. There was Hollis, a rock-like being from a high-gravity world who communicated through vibrations in the floor. A pair of energy-based life forms named Left and Right, who floated in containment suits and spoke in perfect harmony, and Voss, a mammalian alien covered in purple fur who had worked the dangerous cargo division for 20 years. The bud told you about the rift jaws? Yeah, Voss asked. During their break, his translator made his voice sound growly and tired. He did seem serious. Voss barked a laugh that sounded bitter. Sirius doesn't. Cover it, human. I've seen a lot of scary things pass through the station. Acid spitters from the boiling nebula. Void sharks that can survive in har. Vacuum once we even processed a juvenile star eater. He leaned in close. None of them scare me like rift jaws. Those things aren't just predators. They're death shaped into flesh and bone. Derek wanted to ask more questions, but an alarm chimed through the station. Chiric's voice crackled over the communication system. All personnel to stations, we have an early arrival. Riftjaw transport has just entered our sector. They will be docking in 4 hours. Prepare for lockdown protocols. Break room emptied as beings of every shape and size hurried to their posts. Derek followed Voss, trying to memorize the route through the winding corridors of Gamma 7 station. Through the massive windows, he could see the transport ship approaching. It was heavily armored, covered in warning symbols that didn't need translation. First rule, Voss said, as they walked. When they arrive, you do exactly what I say when I say it. Second rule, you wear your reflective visor at all times in the processing area. Third rule, if something goes wrong, you run. You don't try to be hero. You don't think you can help. You just run and seal the bulkhead behind you. And the fourth rule, Voss stopped and turned to face him. There is no fourth rule. Just don't look them in the eyes. Everything else is negotiable. That one isn't. Derek nodded slowly. Back on his family's ranch, his father had taught him to read animals, to understand their body language, their moods, their intentions. A scared horse was different from an angry bull. Protective mother cow required different handling than a territorial stallion. Every creature communicated, even if they couldn't speak, but his father had also taught him one other thing. When everyone tells you an animal is dangerous, you listen. Pride got more ranchers killed than any wild beast ever did. 4 hours later, Derek stood in the processing bay wearing his reflective visor and trying to control his breathing. The transport ship had docked. Through the reinforced glass, he could see the containment units being moved into position. Each one was the size of a small room covered in energy fields and warning lights, and inside each one a riftjaw waited. Even through the multiple layers of protection, Derek could feel something primal stirring in his gut, an instinct older than civilization, the prey animal's recognition of a predator. The galaxy's deadliest four-legged beast had arrived, and Derek Walsh was about to meet them face to face, just not eye to eye, never eye to eye. The processing bay had gone silent except for the hum of containment fields and the nervous breathing of the handling team. Derek watched as the first massive unit rolled off the transport ship, guided by automated systems that kept any living being at a safe distance. Through the reinforced walls of the container, he caught his first real glimpse of a rift jaw. The creature paced inside its prison, each movement precise and controlled. Its armored hide seemed to absorb light, making it look like a shadow given solid form. Those crystalline fangs caught the overhead lights and scattered them into rainbow fragments. Beautiful, isn't it? Voss whispered beside him, like watching a natural disaster in slow motion. You can't look away, even though you know it could kill you. Shrek scuttled between the team members, checking equipment and reciting protocols in a rapid-fire stream of clicks and words. Visor sealed, check. Emergency barriers armed. Check, evacuation routes confirmed. Check, his antenna quivered with each item on his list. The second containment unit arrived, then the third, each held another rift jaw, each one slightly different. One had scars across its armor plating, another was larger than the rest, its muscles coiled with obvious power. A third had distinctive markings along its spine that glowed faintly in the dim light. That by the time all 6 units were in position, Derrick's hands had started to sweat. Inside his work gloves, he'd been around dangerous animals his whole life, but never 6 of the most lethal predators in the galaxy all in one place. Statistical improbability of survival. If anything went wrong was almost funny, almost transfer sequence. Beginning, announced the stations. Computer in a calm, measured voice that seemed inappropriate for the situation. All non-essential personnel, evacuate to safe zones. Essential personnel, maintained minimum safe distance of 50 m around them. The station emptied. Derrick watched through the windows as hundreds of beings fled to the reinforced shelters deep in Gamma 7's core. Whole sections sealed themselves behind blast doors. In minutes, though, processing level was nearly deserted. Where the expendables, Hollies rumbled. His words fell through the floor rather than heard. If this goes wrong, better to lose 5 and 500, cheerful thought. Muttered left and right in harmony, their energy forms flickering anxiously. Inside their containment suits, Voss checked his equipment one more time. All right, rookies and veterans alike. Listen up, we're going to run a standard security scan on each unit. Check the containment fields, verify the transport restraints, confirm the specimens. Health status, we do this by the book. We do this slow and we all go home. Tonight, Derrick took his position as assigned, monitoring readouts from a safe console while the more experienced handlers worked closer to the units. His job was simple. Watch the numbers, call out any anomalies, and don't do anything stupid. The first 3 scans went smoothly. Each rift jaw remained calm, though Derrick noticed they all tracked movement outside their containers with those glowing eyes, intelligent eyes. Not the blank stare of a mindless predator, but something aware and calculating. During the 4th scan, things changed. Voss was running his scanner along the containment field when warning lights began flashing. We've had a power fluctuation in Unit 4. The field is holding, but it's cycling unstable. Turek rushed to the control panel, his multiple limbs flying across the interface, rerouting backup power, compensating for the drain. It should stabilize in 30 seconds. Those 30 seconds stretched like hours. The rift jaw inside Unit 4 had stopped pacing. It stood perfectly still, head tilted slightly, as if listening to something only it could hear. Derrick found himself watching it, fascinated despite the danger point. 20 seconds. The creature's breathing changed faster now. Was it sensing the weakness in its cage? 10 seconds. One of the crystalline fangs began to vibrate, producing a sound just at the edge of Derrick's hearing. High-pitched and unsettling. 5 seconds. The rift jaw tensed, muscles coiling. Then the power stabilized and the field returned to full strength, but the creature didn't relax. It had felt that moment of vulnerability, and now it knew these prisons weren't perfect. They could fail. We need to expedite this transfer, Turek said, his voice tight with stress. Get them to the secure holding area and into the permanent containment system were not equipped. For a long-term stay, they moved faster. After that, running the remaining scans. With quick efficiency, Derek noticed that all 6 rift jaws had become more alert, more focused, whatever Unit 4 had sensed. The others had noticed its reaction. They were communicating, somehow sharing information without sound or gesture that he could detect. The transfer to the holding bay required moving each massive unit through a series of corridors and lifts. Derek helped guide them remotely, making sure the automated systems didn't catch on any obstacles. Through the monitors, he watched each rift jaw react to the movement. None of them seemed distressed. If anything, they appeared curious, studying their surroundings through the transparent sections of their containers. When the last unit was locked in a place in the holding bay, Voss let out a breath that sounded like he'd been holding it for hours. 1 down, 6 days to go. The military transport arrives next week to take them to the research facility. Until then, we keep them fed, monitored, and very, very contained. Derek removed his reflective visor now that they were behind the safety of the control room. The holding bay was visible through multiple screens, each unit positioned in its own reinforced section. The whole area could be vented into space in case of emergency, though Chirek assured them that had never been necessary. Never been necessary yet, Voss corrected. There's always a first time with rift jaws. As the team filed out for their shift break, Derek lingered at the monitors. He studied each creature, noting their different behaviors. The scarred one lay down almost immediately, conserving energy. The largest one continued to pace, examining every inch of its prison. The one with the glowing markings, Unit 7, according to the label, sat on its hunches and stared directly at the nearest camera. Derek found himself staring back at the screen, at those intelligent eyes watching through the lens. It felt less like observing a dangerous animal and more like being observed by something that understood far more than it should. Don't anthropomorphize them, Voss said, appearing at Derek's shoulder. That's how people make mistakes. These aren't misunderstood pets or noble beasts. They're engineered by evolution to be perfect killers, nothing more, nothing less. I wasn't, Derek replied, though he wasn't entirely sure that was true. Just trying to understand them. There's nothing to understand. They kill, that's what they do, that's all they do. Voss headed toward the door, then paused. You did good work today, human. Keep it up. And maybe you'll actually survive this job. After Voss left, Derek looked back at the screens one more time. Unit 7 was still watching the camera, still impatient, waiting for something. Derek had a strange feeling that it was waiting for him. He shook off the thought and left the control room, tried to ignore the weight of those alien eyes following him all the way to the door. 3 days into the transfer period, Derek had settled into a routine. Morning shift meant checking containment integrity, monitoring vital signs, and ensuring the rift jaws received their carefully calculated meals. The creatures ate something that looked like compressed protein blocks, which they could shatter with those crystalline fangs before consuming. Each feeding was done remotely with automated systems that kept handlers far from anything resembling danger. He'd learned their patterns by now. The scarred one, which the team had started calling patient, always ate first and quickly. The largest titan would inspect its food thoroughly before consuming it, as if checking for poison. Unit 7, the one with the glowing markings that watched everything with those unsettling eyes, often waited the longest to eat. Derrick had started thinking of it as observer, though he kept that name to himself. You're getting too comfortable, Voss warned him during their shift. Overlap, that's when mistakes happen. When you start to think you understand them. Derrick wanted to argue, to explain that understanding wasn't the same as being careless, but he recognized the wisdom in Voss's concern. Comfort bred complacency, and complacency got people killed. The accident happened on the fourth day during what should have been a routine maintenance check. Derrick was monitoring from the control room while Chirrut performed a remote diagnostic on Unit 7's containment field. The systems had been running perfectly all week, but protocols demanded regular verification. Everything was going smoothly until the sensor array in Observer's unit began throwing error codes. I'm getting false readings, Chirrut announced, his antenna twitching with confusion. The field strength shows stable, but the monitoring system claims there's a fluctuation. I need to reset the diagnostic array. Can you do it remotely? Derrick asked, watching the numbers scroll across his screen. Yes, but I need to disable the secondary sensors for approximately 4 seconds. Primary systems will maintain containment. It should have been safe. The primary containment field had triple redundancy. For seconds was nothing. Derrick watched as Chirrut initiated the reset sequence. 0.3 seconds in, the primary field flickered, not failed, not collapsed, just flickered like a light on a dimmer switch that someone had bumped. Maybe a quarter second of reduced power, if that, but it was enough. Observer moved faster than Derrick's eyes could track. One moment, the rift jaw was sitting calmly in the center of its unit. The next, it had crossed the entire space and struck the containment barrier with one massive paw. The impact sent a shudder through the whole holding bay. Alarms screamed throughout the station. Red emergency lights bathed everything in crimson. Automated defenses activated. Additional barriers slamming into place around Unit 7. Evacuate. Chirrut's voice was high-pitched with panic. Abandon the holding bay. Seal the section. Hollies and the energy twins were already running, their footsteps and flickering lights disappeared down the corridor as blast doors began to close. Voss grabbed Derrick's arm, trying to pull him away from the control console. Move, human. Now, but Derrick couldn't move. He stared at the monitor showing Unit 7, watching Observer's reaction. The rift jaw had backed away from the barrier. After that single strike, it wasn't throwing itself against the containment in a frenzy. It wasn't trying to escape. It had tested the weakness, and now it was watching, waiting to see what would happen next. It's not attacking, Derrick said. What? Voss yanked harder on his arm. Look at it. The field is stable now. It had a moment of opportunity, and it's not taking it. It's just standing there on the screen. Observer sat back on its hunches in the exact center of the unit. Its head turned slowly until it was facing the camera again, facing Derrick through the digital eye that connected them, and Derrick, without thinking, without considering the consequences or the rules or the thousands of names on that list of the deceased, looked directly into the rift jaw's eyes on the monitor. Don't, Voss shouted, but it was too late. The connection was instant and electric. Derrick felt like he'd touched a live wire, every nerve ending suddenly. And alive, those glowing eyes on the screen held an intelligence that was staggering in its depth. This wasn't an animal, this was a person, a being that thought and felt and understood. Observer tilted its head slowly to the left, studying Derrick through the camera lens. Its crystalline fangs were visible, but not bared in threat. Its posture was relaxed but alert. Every line of its body language spoke of curiosity, not aggression. Derrick knew that language. He'd seen it 1,000 times in horses meeting a new handler, in bulls sizing up whether someone was a threat or just another part of the landscape. This was assessment, not challenge. Easy, Derrick whispered to the screen, his voice soft and steady. Nobody's trying to hurt you, you're okay. The rift jaws, ears small and barely visible among its armor plating, twitched forward. Could it hear him through the audio system? Did it understand tone if not words? Derrick, you need to look away, Voss said, his voice careful now. Very slowly, very carefully. Break eye contact and step back from the screen. It's not going to attack. You don't know that. Nobody knows that. Everyone who's ever made that assumption is dead. Look at it, Voss. Really? Look. Does that look like a creature in a killing frenzy? On the monitor, Observer remained perfectly still except for its eyes, which tracked Derrick's face through the camera with intense focus. Its breathing was slow and controlled. Its muscles were loose, not coiled for a strike. Seconds stretched into a minute. Derrick maintained the eye contact, reading every subtle shift in the rift jaws posture the way his father had taught him to read livestock. The creature was tense but not aggressive, curious but not threatening. It was doing exactly what Derrick was doing, trying to understand what it was facing. After what felt like an hour but was probably less than 3 minutes, Derrick slowly lowered his gaze to the console in front of him. He'd broken eye contact. He was still alive. The rift jaw hadn't even moved. The holding bay alarms were still blaring, but Chiric's voice cut through them from somewhere down the corridor. Derrick, are you alive? Please respond if you're alive. I'm fine, Derrick called back. Everything's fine. The containment is stable. Voss stared at him like he'd grown his second head. You broke the rule. You made direct eye contact with a rift jaw and you're not dead. Yeah. Derrick's hands were shaking now that the adrenaline was catching up with what he'd done. I noticed that. This is impossible. This doesn't happen. This has never happened. Derrick looked back at the monitor. Observer was still watching the camera, but something had changed in its posture. The rift jaw looked almost relaxed now, like a question had been answered. Maybe, Derrick said slowly, the rule isn't as absolute as everyone thinks. Or maybe, Voss countered, you're the luckiest human being who ever lived, and you just used up all your luck in one go. They were both right in a way, but as Derrick watched Observer settle down in its containment unit, calm and at ease for the first time since arriving at the station, he knew something fundamental had changed. He looked death in the eyes, and death had looked back with curiosity instead of hunger. The galaxy's deadliest four-legged beast had just decided Derrick Walsh was interesting, and neither of them knew yet what that would mean. News of Derrick's survival spread through Gamma 7 station faster than a whole breach alarm. Within hours, every being on board knew that a human cargo handler had broken the unbreakable rule and lived to tell about it. By the next morning, the story had jumped to other stations via the communications network. By evening, 3 different xenobiology research teams had requested permission to come study what they were calling the impossible event. Derek found himself in Shurik's office, facing not just a supervisor but also the station commander, a towering being named Grath, who looked like someone had carved a person out of frozen methane and given it a bad attitude. Explained Grath demanded, his voice like grinding glaciers. In detail everything that happened. Derek recounted the incident as accurately as he could, from the sensor malfunction to the moment he'd locked eyes with Observer through the camera. He didn't leave anything out, including his assessment of the rift. Jaw's body language and behavior. Graff listened without interruption, his crystalline eyes unreadable. When Derek finished, the commander turned to Shurik. Your analysis statistically clicked 300 years of documented encounters, 0 survivors who made eye contact. Yet here stands Derek Walsh, alive and unharmed. His antennae drooped. I cannot explain it with current xenobiological models. The human claims the creature was not aggressive. Do you believe this assessment? Shurik hesitated, his mandibles working silently for a moment. The containment sensors recorded no elevated stress markers in the specimen during the encounter. Its heart rate remained stable, body temperature normal by every measurable standard. The rift jaw was calm. He looked at Derek with something that might have been respect. I believe his assessment is accurate, though I cannot explain why the creature behaved this way. Graff turned his attention back to Derek. You have expertise with animals. Yes, from your home world. I grew up on a cattle ranch. Worked with horses, bulls, some wild animals that would wander onto our property, but nothing like a rift jaw. Yet you claim to have read its intentions through observation alone. Body language is pretty universal, Derek said. Predators across different worlds might look different, but fear looks the same. Aggression looks the same. Curiosity looks the same. The rift jaw was curious, not hostile. Graff made a sound like ice cracking. The research teams want access to you and the specimen. They wish to study this interaction, attempt to replicate it under control conditions. I am inclined to grant their request. Derek felt a knot form in his stomach. You want me to make eye contact with Observer again? On purpose? The specimen you call Observer? Yes, also potentially the others. If this is a reproducible phenomenon rather than a statistical anomaly, it could revolutionize our understanding of rift jaw behavior in psychology. And if it's not reproducible, if it was just luck, then you will die and we will return to our previous protocols with better data on the limits of rift jaw tolerance. Graff said it matter-of-factly, like discussing the weather. Do you consent to participate in this research? Derek thought about the list of names, all those beings who'd looked into a rift jaw's eyes and never looked away. He thought about Observer's calm assessment, the intelligence in those alien eyes. He thought about his father's voice when everyone tells you an animal is dangerous, you listen. But his father had also taught him something else. Animals weren't machines. They were individuals, each one different, each one capable of choice and change. Maybe the problem wasn't the rift jaws. Maybe it was that everyone approached them with fear and aggression, and the creatures simply responded in kind. "I'll do it," Derek said, "but I have conditions." Graf's expression didn't change, but Derek sensed interest. "State them first." "We do this slowly. No rushing, no pressure. If observer shows any signs of actual aggression, we stop immediately. Second, I want access to all historical data on Rift John. Counters, every report, every incident. Third, I want to work directly with the research teams, not just be a test subject." "Acceptable." The first research team arrives tomorrow. You will begin preparations immediately. Graf stood, signaling the meeting was over. "Do not make me regret this decision, human." After the commander left, Churik turned to Derek with all his eyes focused in a way that seemed significant. "You understand the risk you are taking, E. Then why you could refuse find another job, leave the station, and never see your Rift Jaw again?" Derek considered the question. Why was he doing this? PETA curiosity, some misguided sense that he could succeed where thousands had failed. No, it was simpler than that, because observer didn't attack me, Derek said, when it had a moment of weakness in the containment field, when it could have tried to break free and kill everything in its path. It didn't. It tested the barrier once and then waited to see what would happen. That's not a mindless killing machine. That's someone making choices. Churik was quiet for a long moment. "In my culture there is a saying, the sky does not fall simply because you have not seen it happen, meaning that impossibilities exist, whether we acknowledge them or not." His antennae rose slightly. "Perhaps you have shown us an impossibility, Derek Walsh. Or perhaps you have simply revealed our own ignorance." That night Derek couldn't sleep. He spent hours in the station's data archives, reading every report he could find about Rift John. Counters, the pattern was clear. Approach with fear and weapons, get killed. Every single incident involved handlers who were terrified, security teams ready to shoot, containment failures that led to panic. Not once did he find a report of someone approaching a Rift Jaw calmly, treating it like a living being instead of a monster. Near dawn, Derek made his way to the observation room overlooking the holding bay. Through the reinforced glass he could see all 6 containment units. Most of the Rift Jaws were asleep or resting, but observer was awake, sitting in the same position as before, watching the cameras. Derek activated the communication system, letting his voice carry into the holding bay through speakers. "I don't know if you can understand me," he said quietly, "but tomorrow we're going to try something that might get me killed. I'm going to trust that you're more than what everyone says you are. I'm going to trust that you can choose not to kill me." Observer's ears twitched at the sound of his voice. The creature stood and walked to the front of its containment unit, as close to the camera as the field would allow. It sat again, perfectly still, and waited. "I've worked with a lot of dangerous animals," Derek continued, talking more to organize his own thoughts than because he expected understanding. "The ones that hurt people usually do it because they're scared or defensive or protecting something, not because they're evil or mindless. I'm betting you're the same. I'm betting that if I treat you with respect, if I don't come at you with fear or aggression, you'll respond in kind." The Rift Jaw tilted its head, gesture that looked eerily thoughtful. "So here's the deal," Derek said. "Tomorrow I'm going to look you in the eyes again, for real this time, not through a camera, and you're going to have a choice. You can kill me and prove everyone right, or you can show them that they've been wrong about you for 300 years. Observer's crystalline fangs caught the light as it opened its mouth. Slightly, not a threat display, almost like a yawn or maybe the alien equivalent of a smile. Then it settled down onto the floor of its unit, resting its massive head on its front paws, still watching the camera with those intelligent, glowing eyes. Derek took that as a good sign, at least he hoped. It was. Tomorrow would tell. The research team arrived exactly on schedule, led by a being that introduced herself as Dr. Renee. She was tall and thin, with blue skin that seemed to shimmer in the light, and 4 arms that moved independently as she gestured. While talking, behind her came a small army of assistants, all carrying equipment and displaying the nervous energy of scientists facing something unprecedented. The human who survived, Renee said, looking Derek up and down with eyes that had too many pupils. You don't look special. I'm not. Derek replied, just stubborn. Stubbornness is not typically considered a survival trait when facing apex predators. She moved past him toward the observation window, studying the rift jaws with obvious fascination. Yet here you stand. Which specimen made eye contact with you? Derek pointed to Unit 7, that one. I've been calling it Observer. Interesting designation. Why Observer? Because it watches everything. Seems more interested in understanding its environment than the others. Renee made a note on a holographic display that floated near her shoulder. We will begin with non-invasive testing, behavioral observation, stress response analysis, communication pattern studies. Only after we have comprehensive baseline data will we attempt direct visual contact again. She turned to Derek. You will not approach the specimen until I authorize it. Clear? Derek bristled at the authoritative tone but nodded. He understood the need for caution, even if part of him wanted to argue that he'd already proven that interaction was possible. The first 2 days of testing were tedious. The research team monitored every aspect of observers' behavior, comparing it to historical data on rift jaws. They measured its reactions to various stimuli, tested its problem-solving abilities with puzzle feeders, even analyzed the sound frequencies it produced during rest periods. What they found surprised everyone except Derek. The specimen demonstrates cognitive abilities far exceeding our previous estimations, Renee announced during a briefing on the 3rd day. It solves spatial reasoning puzzles designed for beings with advanced intelligence. It recognized patterns and sequences that should be beyond animal comprehension. And most significantly, it appears to modulate its behavior based on who is observing it. What do you mean? Turek asked. Watch. Renee pulled up video footage showing observers' containment unit on screen. Voss approached to perform a routine check. The rift jaw immediately stood, moved to the back of its unit, and adopted what Derek recognized as a defensive posture, not aggressive but weary and ready. Then the video switched to footage of Derek performing the same check. Observer barely moved, remaining relaxed and attentive but showing no defensive behavior at all. It can differentiate between individuals, Renee continued. It remembers who has shown it respect and who has shown fear. This suggests a level of social cognition we never suspected rift jaws possessed. Or maybe Derek offered. We never gave him a chance to show it before, hard to demonstrate. Intelligence when everyone who looks at you dies in a panic. Renaz multiple pupils focused on him sharply, an astute observation, which brings us to the primary experiment. Tomorrow we will place you in a controlled environment. With the specimen, you will make direct eye contact under monitored conditions. We have prepared every safety measure possible, but I will not mislead you about the risk. I understand, do you? She moved closer, her expression serious. If our hypothesis is wrong, if your first encounter was merely a statistical anomaly, you will die. The rift jaw will enter its killing frenzy, and nothing we have can stop it before it reaches you. Emergency barriers will seal you in with the creature. You will not have time to regret your choice. Derek felt his mouth go dry, but kept his voice steady. I know I'm still willing. The next morning arrived too quickly. Derek stood in a specialized testing chamber that had been constructed overnight, a space large enough to hold both him and observer, with room to move but small enough that the emergency barriers could seal instantly if needed. The walls were reinforced transparent alloy, allowing the research team to observe from safety, while multiple cameras recorded every angle. Observer was brought in through a secured corridor, its containment field guiding it into the chamber before shutting off. The rift jaw stood perfectly still for a moment, taking in its new surroundings before its eyes found Derek across the room. They'd removed Derek's reflective visor. Nothing stood between him and those alien eyes now, except 15 of open space and his own faith that he'd read the situation correctly. Beginning test. Renaz's voice came through speakers overhead. Derek, you may proceed at your own pace. If a specimen shows any aggression, the emergency barriers will activate. They should engage in 3 seconds. Should Derek notice not what even Renaz wasn't certain they'd be fast enough. He took a slow breath and started walking toward observer. Each step felt like moving through water, his body fighting against instincts that screamed at him to run, but he kept his movements calm and deliberate, approaching the rift jaw the same way he'd approach a nervous horse in an unfamiliar corral. Observer watched him come, its head lowering slightly in what Derek hoped was a non-threatening posture. When Derek was 5 away, the rift jaw sat down, folding its powerful legs beneath it in a clear signal. I'm not hunting you. Derek stopped and sat down as well, crossing his legs and resting his hands on his knees, matching the creature's posture, showing he wasn't a threat either. Then he looked up, meeting observer's eyes directly for the second time. The connection was still electric, still intense, but different now. Without the distance of camera between them, Derek could see every detail of those eyes, the way they seemed to hold light and shadow simultaneously. He could see intelligence there, and curiosity, and something else, loneliness. Maybe the isolation of being seen as a monster by every living thing you encountered. Hey, Derek said softly, remember me. Observer's ears twitched forward. Its breathing remained steady, controlled. No signs of the legendary killing frenzy. No, just one being looking at another, trying to understand. Minutes passed in silence. Derek didn't break eye contact, didn't move except to breathe. He let the rift jaw study him the same way he was studying it. Trust had to be built, not demanded. Finally, Observer made a sound, low and rumbling. It came from deep in its chest, not a growl. Something else. Derrick had heard similar sounds from large animals before, usually when they were content or relaxed, a purr maybe, or the rift jaw. Equivalent, yeah, Derrick said, smiling slightly. We're okay, aren't we, you and me? The rift jaw stood slowly, and Derrick heard the research team gasp over the speakers, but Observer wasn't attacking, it was walking toward him. Each massive paw placed carefully and deliberately. When it was close enough, it lowered its head and pressed its snout gently against Derrick's extended hand. The crystalline fangs were centimeters from his fingers. One bite could sever his arm, one shake of that powerful head could snap his neck, but Derrick felt no fear, only wonder. The creature's hide was warmer than he'd expected and harder, like touching stone. That breathed good, Derrick whispered. That's good. Observer made that rumbling sound again, louder now, and Derrick felt it vibrate through his bones. The rift jaw's eyes remained locked on his, but there was no challenge there, only acceptance, recognition, a bridge built between species that everyone had insisted was impossible. That eye in the observation room, Renee stood frozen, watching something that shouldn't exist, a human and a rift jaw together in peace. Galaxy's deadliest four-legged beast had just proven it could choose friendship over fury, and Derek Walsh had proven that sometimes the most dangerous thing wasn't the predator, it was the assumption that predators couldn't be anything else. The footage of Derek's interaction with observers spread across the galactic network like wildfire. Within days, every major news outlet was running stories about the human who had befriended the unfriendable. Scientific journals demanded data, military organizations wanted explanations, and 300 years of accepted wisdom about rift jaws began to crumble under the weight of undeniable evidence. Derrick spent the following week working with the research team and all 6 rift jaws. What they discovered revolutionized xenobiology. The creatures weren't mindless predators, they were highly social, capable of complex communication through body language and subsonic vocalizations that most species couldn't detect. The killing frenzy everyone feared wasn't inevitable, it was a stress response triggered by the fear and aggression they'd always been met with. Titan, the largest rift jaw, took 3 days to trust Derek enough for eye contact. Patient, the scarred one, needed only hours. Each had its own personality, its own preferences, its own way of interacting with the world. They were individuals, not interchangeable monsters. Everything changed on the 7th day when pirates attacked the station. The assault came without warning. Gamma 7 sensors detected the ships only seconds before they opened fire, their weapons designed to disable rather than destroy. They wanted the station intact and its valuable cargo intact, too, including 6 extremely rare and valuable rift jaws. Derrick was in the holding bay with Observer when the alarm started. Screaming through the windows, he could see small attack craft swarming around the station's exterior, cutting through defensive positions with practiced efficiency. All personnel to emergency shelters. Grat's voice boomed over the communication system. We are under attack. Security teams engage at will. Civilians evacuate immediately. Derrick started toward the exit, but Observer made a sharp, urgent sound that stopped The rift jaw was pacing now, agitated in a way Derrick had never seen. All 6 creatures were reacting to something, their heads turning in unison toward the same section of wall. There, coming through there, Derrick realized, understanding the rift jaw's superior senses had detected the pirates' approach before the station's sensors could. They're cutting through the hall to get to you. Observer looked at Derrick and made a series of quick vocalizations that he was starting to recognize as communication. The meaning was clear. Even without words, danger coming. Need to act. I can't let you out, Derrick said, his mind racing. If you're loose in station, people will panic. They'll try to kill you. The rift jaw moved to its containment field and pressed one paw against it, not attacking, not testing, asking, trusting Derrick to make the right choice. An explosion rocked the holding bay as the pirates breached the outer hole. Derrick saw them pouring through the gap, dozens of armored figures carrying weapons designed to tranquilize large specimens. They'd done their research. They knew what they were after. Derrick made a decision that would probably get him court-martialed if he survived. He ran to the control panel and entered the emergency override code Shirak had shown him during training. 6 containment fields dropped simultaneously. 6 rift jaws stood free for the first time since arriving at the station. The pirates saw them and started firing tranquilizer rounds, but rift jaws from a high-gravity death world moved faster than projectiles designed for normal creatures. They scattered using the holding bay's equipment as cover. Their movements coordinated like a pack that had hunted together for years. With me, Derrick shouted, not sure if they'd understand or care. Protect the station. Observer was at his side instantly, followed by the others. They moved as a unit through the corridor, Derrick leading them toward the main breach point where station security was fighting a losing battle against superior numbers. The first pirate who saw them screamed and opened fire with live rounds, forgetting his tranquilizer in sheer terror. The shots bounced off Titan's armored hide as the massive rift jaw charged forward and struck the pirate with one paw, sending him flying into a bulkhead hard enough to dent the metal. But the rift jaw didn't kill him, didn't even seriously injure him, just neutralized the threat and moved on. More pirates appeared and more screaming followed. Some ran, some tried to fight. None of them expected the rift jaws to be working with a human, protecting him, while he directed them to defend strategic positions throughout the station. Patient used its agility to leap between walls, herding pirates away from civilian shelters. The 2 smaller rift jaws worked together to cut off escape routes, driving the attackers toward security teams who could capture them. An observer stayed with Derrick, reading his intentions and translating them into actions the other rift jaws could follow. The battle lasted 18 minutes. When it was over, every pirate was either unconscious, captured, or had fled back to their ships. Not one had been killed, though many would need extensive medical treatment. The rift jaws had been terrifyingly effective, while showing remarkable restraint. Derrick stood in the main corridor, breathing hard, with observer sitting calmly beside him and the other 5 rift jaws arrayed around them like bodyguards. Station security approached cautiously, weapons lowered but ready, not sure what to make of the scene. Grath arrived minutes later, his crystalline features somehow managing to Convey shock, report he demanded. The pirates breached the holding bay, Derek explained. I released the rift jaws. They helped defend the station. You released them, you freed the galaxy's most dangerous predators during a crisis situation. Yes, sir, and they saved lives, probably dozens of them. Graf looked at the 6 creatures, then at the captured pirates being led away by security, then back at Derek. This will require extensive documentation and review, but you're not immediately arrested, which I suppose indicates my preliminary assessment of your actions over the following days as investigators reviewed the security footage and interviewed witnesses. The truth became undeniable. The rift jaws had fought to protect the station and its inhabitants. They'd shown judgment, restraint, and loyalty to being who had shown them respect. Dr. Renaz's final report recommended a complete overhaul of protocols regarding rift jaws and other so-called Class 5 extinction threats. The military research facility that was supposed to receive the specimens withdrew their request. Instead, a new facility was proposed, one focused on communication and cooperation rather than containment and study. Derek was offered the position of lead behavioral specialist. He accepted on one condition: the rift jaws would be treated as intelligent beings deserving of dignity, not as specimens or weapons. 3 months later, Derek stood in the observation room of a new facility, watching Observer and the others interact in a habitat designed for their comfort rather than maximum security. Visitors from across the galaxy came to see the impossible sight: humans and rift jaws working together, learning from each other, building something that looked remarkably like friendship. Chirrut approached, his antennae rising in. What Derek had learned was the insectoid equivalent of smile. You have caused quite the disruption in galactic xenobiology. Derek Walsh. 3 centuries of established fact overturned by one stubborn human. Not that stubborn, Derek replied, just willing to look past the fear and see what was really there. And what was really there? Derek watched Observer teaching two newly arrived rift jaws how to interact safely with human handlers. The big creature was patient and gentle, demonstrating through example rather than force, a natural teacher given the chance to be one. People, Derek said, simply different from us, dangerous if threatened, but people nonetheless, capable of choice, friendship, trust. All they needed was someone willing to extend those things first. Voss appeared behind them, his purple fur looking slightly less unkempt than usual. He'd been one of the first to volunteer for training in the new interaction protocols, overcoming decades of fear. Through watching Derek's example, the new arrivals are asking for you, Voss said. They won't settle down until they meet the human who broke the rule. Derek smiled. Was it really a rule? Was it just a misunderstanding that became dogma? Perhaps, Chirrut mused, or perhaps rules exist until someone is brave enough to prove they don't. As Derek headed down to the habitat, observers saw him through the transparent wall and made that rumbling sound of greeting that still sent shivers down his spine. Not fear anymore, something closer to pride. The deadliest four-legged beast in the galaxy was happy to see him, and Derek was happy to see it back. He'd ignored the rule everyone said would get him killed. In doing so, he discovered something far more important, that empathy and understanding could bridge gaps that weapons and walls never could. That deadly didn't mean mindless, that predators could choose peace when peace was offered, the universe had told him. Rift jaws were unstoppable killers. Derek Walsh had casually proven the universe wrong, and in the process he'd shown the galaxy that sometimes the most dangerous assumptions were the ones everyone accepted without